Rain pattered against the window pane as Lucas stared blankly at his computer screen, the glow reflecting off his glasses. He was an ordinary young man with an unassuming demeanor, working a mundane job in data entry. His life was a series of repetitive motions, and lately he'd felt invisible to the world, a ghost slipping through the cracks of a bustling city. That evening, feeling particularly estranged, he absent-mindedly scrolled through app recommendations on his phone. One caught his eye. EgoShield. Protect yourself from egocentricity. Without much thought, he downloaded it, hoping for a distraction from his gnawing sense of insignificance. The app greeted him with a simple interface and a single prompt. Allow EgoShield to access your camera and microphone? Shrugging, Lucas agreed. The screen flickered, and a soft hum emanated from the device before it returned to the home screen. Odd, he thought, but dismissed it as a glitch. That night his dreams were vivid. A shadowed figure lurking just beyond his sight, whispering inaudible words. He awoke in a cold sweat, the details slipping away like mist. As days passed, Lucas began to feel a creeping sensation of being watched. In the bustling cafe where he sipped his morning coffee, he sensed eyes upon him. On the subway, amidst the sea of indifferent faces, he felt a presence fixated on him. Brushing it off as paranoia, he tried to focus on his routine. However, when his phone buzzed with a notification from his photo gallery, confusion set in. New memory saved, it read. Opening the gallery, he found a photo of himself sitting on a park bench, a place he hadn't been in weeks. In the background, among the trees, stood a blurred silhouette watching him. Unease tightened its grip on Lucas. He scrolled further and discovered more photos, each one capturing him in various locations around the city, always with the same shadowy figure in the background. His heartbeat quickened as he realized the photos were taken at times and places he couldn't recall. Desperate for answers, he tried deleting the app, but it remained stubbornly on his screen. The uninstall option had vanished, and any attempt to force it closed resulted in the phone freezing momentarily before returning to normal, the app icon gleaming ominously. The following night, the city was shrouded in a dense fog. Streetlights cast eerie halos, and sounds were muffled into an otherworldly hush. Lucas navigated the misty streets toward his apartment, each footstep echoing in the emptiness. The feeling of being watched intensified. He glanced over his shoulder repeatedly, each time met with the sight of deserted sidewalks. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. Another photo notification. Hands trembling, he opened it to see an image of himself at that very moment, walking through the fog. Behind him, the shadowy figure was closer than ever. Features still indistinguishable, but posture intent. Panic surged through him. He broke into a run, the fog thickening as if trying to ensnare him. His breaths came in ragged gasps and his lungs burned. Turning a corner, he collided with a passerby. "Watch where you're going," the stranger snapped before disappearing into the mist. Lucas's apologies fell onto empty air. He stumbled into his apartment building, slamming the door behind him. In the dim light of the hallway, he hurriedly pressed the elevator button. The doors opened to reveal an empty car, and he stepped inside, jabbing the button for his floor repeatedly. As the elevator ascended, the lights flickered. The car shuddered to a halt between floors, and the overhead lights went out, plunging him into darkness. The emergency lighting cast a feeble glow, and in the mirrored walls he saw his reflection, and behind him, the figure. It was no longer a blur. Pale skin stretched taut over sharp features, eyes black as voids stared into his. A twisted smile crept across its face. Lucas spun around, but the elevator was empty. Heart pounding, he pressed himself against the wall, desperately clicking the emergency button. His phone vibrated again. With dread, he looked at the new photo. It was a close-up of the figure's face, eyes boring into his soul, captioned with a message, "You cannot hide from yourself." The elevator jolted back to life, doors opening to his floor. Lucas stumbled out, racing to his apartment. Locking the door behind him, he sank to the floor, overwhelmed by fear. His mind raced. Was he losing his grip on reality? Gathering what courage he had left, he decided to call for help. But when he tried to dial, the phone displayed only the EgoShield app. The screen went black, and a video began to play. It showed a montage of all the moments he'd felt invisible, the times he'd been overlooked and ignored. The figure appeared again, speaking in a voice that echoed in his head. "You have hidden behind anonymity for too long. Embrace who you are." A realization dawned on Lucas. The figure wasn't a stranger. It was a manifestation of himself, the parts he'd suppressed and ignored. The app wasn't invading his life. It was forcing him to confront his own neglected identity. Summoning his resolve, he spoke aloud. "What do you want from me?" The room fell silent. Then the figure stepped out from the shadows of the room itself, no longer confined to reflections or photos. "To be seen," it whispered. Lucas took a deep breath. "I see you," he replied. "I acknowledge you." The figure slowly nodded, and a sense of calm washed over him. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the room returned to its normal state. His phone screen cleared. The app vanished. Lucas felt different, lighter, more present. He understood that in denying parts of himself, he'd become a stranger in his own life. The haunting had been his subconscious pleading for recognition. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows. Lucas stepped outside, feeling the warmth on his skin. The world seemed more vibrant, sounds more vivid. As he walked down the street, people met his gaze with friendly nods. He smiled, genuinely, for the first time in years. His phone buzzed with a new notification. Hesitant, he looked at it. It was a selfie he'd never taken, but this time he was smiling, and there was no shadow behind him. The caption read, "Welcome back.